Well, I think the coolest thing about SpellForce as a series is the idea that you're actually blending two genres of gameplay together. You're getting a real-time strategy game and a role-playing game all combined into one really incredible fantasy experience. An example of that is within a given map, you may be able to actually start out the map and have the Dwarven King, for instance, request that you go complete some quests for him in a dungeon that's infested with skeletons. And so you can go down there into that dungeon, actually work your way through, complete the quests, and then within the same map, once you've completed those quests, you may go to a completely different section of the map where then you are granted a dwarven city that you can build up buildings, build up a force of dwarves and humans, and then go attack another force of orcs in traditional real-time strategy game format. So I think that blending of the two genres is something that gives SpellForce a completely different flavor than any other game out there. Another great feature of the game is the click and fight system, and this is something that the developer Phenomic has come up with just to deal with the fact that the player can have up to 7 different heroes under their control, all with special abilities at one time. And so the way to deal with that in a traditional game, you would have to find your hero on screen, click on that hero, click on their ability, and then click on an enemy to use that ability. Well, when you have 7 heroes, all with 3 to 5 different spells active at any time, that becomes quickly unwieldy in a massive battle. So what we do instead is you can just click on one enemy, and then there's context-sensitive icons that will appear under the hero's face that tell you what spells you can use on a given enemy. So you quickly click on an enemy, click on whatever spells you want to use for as many different heroes at once as you want, and then all of those spells are unleashed, and you can quickly find another enemy and do the same thing. Now, the same system also works for heroes. So if I have a hero that has been wounded, I simply click on that hero's portrait, and then I get context-sensitive icons that tell me I can heal my hero with another one of the heroes because they may have that ability. So it's a unique system that just allows great freedom to allow the player to use all of their special abilities in a dynamic, real-time strategy setting. The developer Phenomic has done an outstanding job of crafting a true high fantasy story with 40 to 50 hours of gameplay that the player is never going to get tired of going through. I mean, there's an incredible amount of replayability in this game because there are different factions within the game that the player will encounter throughout the course of the gameplay, and the way you interact with those factions can be different each time you go through a given map. So the story is incredibly dynamic. You begin as a member of the Shy-Con, which is basically a human that has been infused with blood of dragons to give them magical powers. And the Shy-Con are under attack by, of course, in true fantasy fashion, a dark, evil force. And we've got to go out and find out why they're choosing to attack the Shy-Con. But through the course of the story, it takes a number of interesting twists and turns that you wouldn't typically see in a fantasy setting. So you may end up working for either side throughout the course of the story, and you'll just have to play to find out. SpellForce, as I mentioned, you've got a 40 to 50 hour single-player campaign, which is huge in today's conventions in terms of gameplay. In addition to that, there's a separate co-op campaign where you plus 2 other friends can play for up to 20 or 30 hours of gameplay, a completely different storyline with completely different maps. So I think there we're up to, 60 to 80 hours of gameplay. And then in addition to that, there is a traditional multiplayer skirmish mode where you and up to 5 other players, so up to 3 versus 3, can go online, choose one of the 3 factions, and then duke it out in an online battle. The development team has come up with a brand new graphical engine for this game that takes advantage of all of the latest bells and whistles on today's graphics cards. You have foot soldiers in the game, you've got mounted soldiers which are dramatically bigger than the foot soldiers, we've got a number of winged creatures in the game, and then the coolest unit in the game is each of the 3 factions has what we call a Titan, which is a massive super unit that you can only build towards the end of the game, and that looks probably 5 times bigger than anything else on screen, and goes through swinging a massive sword blazing with fire. So just some incredible effects and incredible sense of scale that make for an excellent game. One of the really cool things about this game is that so many games that try to create a hybrid blend of different genres, you end up losing one thing from one of the genres. Whereas I think that this team has done just an incredible job with the amount of content they've been able to actually successfully get into the game. So in true RPG fashion, you can actually control and upgrade your avatar along with 5 other heroes with up to 100 different skill sets, and each one of those skills has multiple subsets and abilities that the player can fully control for all of the heroes, which is an incredible amount of depth and an incredible amount of replayability. In addition to that, there's over 1,000 different items that you can use, equip, and actually see in real time once you equip them on your character. So if you get a new set of armor for any of those heroes, you will see it instantly in real time once you equip it. You can equip multiple weapons in your hand, so you could actually have a sword and then a mace in either hand, or equip a shield and a sword, and you will see that again in real time. So that's sort of the RPG elements and the amount of depth that they've gotten into the game. In terms of an RTS, you've got all of the standard things you would come to expect. You've got huge maps that will take, often in the single player experience, more than 2 hours to complete a single map, which is huge. In addition to that, you've got over 100 different unit types in the game. You have 3 different factions that you can control throughout the course of the game or in multiplayer, and each of those 3 factions has 3 races within the faction that you can also control all of their units for each of those individual factions. So it's just a huge amount of variety in terms of RTS and RPG gameplay. One of the great things that the developer did from SpellForce 1 to SpellForce 2 is they carried through all of the fantastic things that made SpellForce 1 an original and exciting game, but they also took to heart a lot of the criticisms in making SpellForce 2. Examples of that would be in SpellForce 1, the RPG system used a stat-based system that was very complex. And the developers felt that that was a little bit too much for maybe people that enjoyed the RTS side of gaming. So instead, they've sort of pared that down to a much simpler skill tree, but they haven't taken away any of the complexity of the choices that you can make. And similarly with the RTS, they've done a great job of implementing a number of new interesting features that add to the RTS genre, such as the click and fight system. But in addition, they've added some other cool new features, such as very simple hotkeys in order to get to buildings and build units very quickly, and also just improving the way that you can control your units and build your units in the game. The reason I think SpellForce 2 is such an incredible game, and I think that every gamer out there will truly appreciate this, is the incredibly immersive and rich world that they have created. This game combines these 2 elements so successfully. You've got a true RTS game and a true RPG game without sacrificing any of the elements that make either one of those genres great. It seems like every game that comes out nowadays talks about how they appeal to a wide variety of gamers, but I think the amazing thing about SpellForce 2 is that it truly does. Any gamer out there is going to be able to pick up this game and see that the developer has truly delivered on the promise of unique gameplay, unlike anything they've seen in either genre separately.